This podcast is brought to you by Steede Motor Group, Claregalway. For your personalised vehicle shopping experience, find out more at steedemotorgroup.ie.
So delighted now to be joined by Maurice Brosnan to look back in the action in the Galway Senior and Intermediate Hurling Championships over the weekend. We had round two in both, and there is two intermediate games taking place as well tonight. Carramore and Sidon and Spittle and Ballindreen, they were postponed at the weekend, so they're taking place in Pearse Stadium and Tune Stadium this evening as we record. But Maurice, before we get into the action and everything, what have you made of the Club Hurling Championship as a whole so far?
Good question. I've been impressed, I think. Yeah, I have been impressed. There's two sides to this, Paul. You went into this, I think we all did, with maybe a bit of misgivings about the format, or definitely I don't think anybody was fully convinced that was it cutthroat enough. I fully appreciate the need to kind of guarantee gains, but it kind of reminded me a small bit of the conversation around the new football championship in the inter-county format, that people didn't know about the jeopardy in it. But now you see it, and you see the excitement, and how, she's definitely Group 4 and Group 2 anyway, and you're looking at the standings and thinking, yeah, this is working. The hurling has been really good. There's some very entertaining games. From a fan's perspective, the fact that we're seeing as many games streamed as we are, I think is a great thing. That's been long awaited. Product itself has been decent. Probably a couple of small things that they could improve around it, but like overall, it's hard to have too many complaints. And the complaints I would have, a lot of it, unfortunately, isn't fixable. Like there's no getting away from the effect of weather last weekend in particular had on Ireland. We've done everything right. Like we got the championship up and running early, in the height of August, getting them into the best, what should be the best stadiums in the country, or in the county, sorry. But the weather, just especially Friday night, was just crazy. I met a man today who told me, did Crawhall change their jerseys at half time from green to yellow? Not, they didn't change obviously the colour for that, but just trying to get into a new kit, that the weather itself is definitely having an impact on the games. But overall, the kind of very few complaints. I think the format as it is has been working. The games have been good. The hurling has been high quality. There's a lot of really good talking points. So it's hard to have too many complaints.
Yeah, even when I was looking back at round one with a couple of the lads on the podcast, it was kind of all the kind of favourites that were expected really to win, did win, and there was maybe a few comprehensive victories. But the amount of games last weekend that one team robbed it at the death, it was just like a common theme really over the weekend.
Yeah, and I would be in I appreciate I'm in the minority about that, but those one-sided results, as you mentioned, that will always happen. And it's kind of why, in my opinion, just speaking from my perspective, it's why the championship format was kind of had to change. We had to go to 16 teams because I fully appreciate the honour and status that comes with being a senior club and how much that means to a side. But at the end of the day, that gulf is not good for a competition. If you can tighten that as much as possible, I think that's a good thing. So that's why I like the fact that I personally the idea of getting to 16. I thought that was a good idea. It was a worthwhile endeavour. I do think that, as you mentioned, a couple of results in the first week, and you look at the score difference of clubs like Mulcullen, and maybe that doesn't lead to credence to the idea that it's as competitive as you would like it to be. But then on the flip side, as you mentioned, then when you've got games like, or even just drama within games like the Castlegar game now, for example, or even Friday night, like the Tullochmore and Gorton, how that closed out, you can't help but captivated by that. And I suppose to a certain extent, you're at the mercy of the games you see, obviously within that if you had seen, maybe if you're at the Loughrea game, for example, I'm sure you're looking at this and thinking, were games really as competitive as you want them to be? But by and large, yeah, I think last weekend in particular did deliver.
Yeah, really, it was only really the Loughrea result, maybe the Thomas's result, I should say, that there was one-sided games here. Just a question that came in before we get into the matches from one of the followers on Instagram. They put the question to the Instagram page of who has been the club hurler of the year so far for you. Has there been one in particular that's stood out?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll impose my own rule. I won't pick an inter-county player. A guy who I think should be an inter-county player. Let's go this way. He's not a Shefflin hurler maybe, but and this is, look, I'm saying nothing new here. I appreciate that too. But you watched Jamie Ryan's performance last weekend, and just the wizardry, the absolute wizardry of the way he plays and how in sync he is with the entire team. I thought he was I just thought he was immense, Paul. Like I think he makes the team tick. He's so, and he wasn't. I'm not saying he was perfect. There was one stage, especially in the second half, he was bearing down the throat, and he dropped a hand pass just behind him, and you were thinking if he was away there was a huge chance. But he's just a guy who I love watching him hurl. I absolutely love how he knits the team together. I love how he sees a pass, that little flick. I think the stream sport call it a samba flick on Twitter, which is a good line. Like yeah, he's just a guy who he's absolutely electric to hurl. If I wasn't ruling out intercounty players, Darren Morrissey for me was, he was immense. It must be such a luxury to be able to drop an intercounty player like that into the corner. But yeah, I think for me, one of the great joys for Galway Club hurling is getting to see someone like Jamie Ryan up close. So I'll go with that.
Yeah, Jamie Ryan was obviously non-tugging really all year for Galway. He got a hamstring injury. It set him back, but he's one of those players. Of anyone who's been on the podcast who's talked about Jamie Ryan, he's like completely off the script to like what a Galway forward is.
Yeah, and I, to a certain extent, I wonder, does that does it go against him to a sense? I do think Jamie Ryan flourishes because of the system that's around him too. Like they play, the way Loughrea play is in sync with what they want him to do. So you can see that with, you watch how well guys kind of knit it together. I don't know, it's an interesting one. Would the likes of the Carries or Jamie Ryan stand out in other clubs if they're, if you're trying to compete in different terms? Like these are not guys who, with the greatest respect in the world, they're great athletes, but they're not going to compete, physically with a lot of players, but they absolutely flourish in the system that they're in. And it's the small things that he does. Like there's the headline scores and his ability running with the ball, which is brilliant. But it's just small how often he is the player who instigates, the triangles, getting him out of trouble, how he drops into that pocket just in front of the back six. So if a ball goes in long, which a lot, you see that still in Galway hurling a bit, that teams are playing out long. And so immediately that's your chance to kind of rebound. You're counting if you go long on top of a guy. And the first outlet, the guy there who's willing to go and, instigate that transition is so often Jamie Ryan. And this is back, he drops deep to get on that, and he still is able to contribute at the top end of the field. So his vision is amazing. Like, you can see passes that a lot of other players can't see. He's just, yeah, he's the type of hurler that you love watching him specifically. I met a man there recently who was telling me that for the Kerry County Championship, one of the ideas they've been talking about is to have, this is a legitimate idea, is to have a Clifford cam, just a camera on Clifford, because people love watching him specifically. And Jamie Ryan is kind of that player for me. He's kind of guy who nearly go to a game and just watch Jamie Ryan specifically to see how he ties in a game.
Because we're obviously touching on Jamie Ryan, we'll go to the Loughrea game on Saturday. Just obviously because we're talking about how Jamie Ryan has been flourishing in this Loughrea system. Like, Loughrea Cappy was the game in this group. Obviously, by Colin and Kilnadeema aren't at that level really to compete with those two teams. It was a game. I know Capitana lost 2 or 3 players this year to travel and different bits and pieces, but it was a game you expected kind of a local derby to be close. And anyone who's been on the podcast has tipped Loughrea for the county title, and it's fair to say that was a real statement on Saturday.
Yeah, if you were the armchair analysis was you watch a game like that and you think, are they going too well? Like, this is at this time of the year, they're absolutely flying, and you think back to the county final replay was played at the end of November last year, wasn't it? The 27th of November, I think. So, but yeah, I mean, I can't add too much. The only thing about that though, but what was interesting for me, right, and maybe this is like Loughrea's principle of play summed up for me was a spell, I think around, in and around, I can't remember exactly, but around the 20-minute mark, there was 6-5. It was a close game. There wasn't too much from, and then Loughrea got a free, tapped that over, and then I don't know if you remember, Joe Mooney hit incredible points. Like, geez, that the point on his right hand side, right in front of the stand, straight over the black spot, and then there's an attack and it breaks down. There's another attack and breaks down, and there's a long ball pumped in on top. Do you remember the one on top where it's going towards Liam Collins, and Kerry gets out in front, breaks the ball. And if you just watch that point, it ends with a Dylan Shaughnessy shot from the half-forward line. Watch the way Loughrea work out the ball there. Like, that is how they work it through the lines, the little triangles they make. It's Kerry, Johnny Cohen giving a 1-2, breaking out, not head down. His head, as he's receiving the ball, you can actually see his his head up vision scanning, sees Shaughnessy coming, always has 2 or 3 options off the shoulder, pops the ball to Shaughnessy in the wing, who nails this ridiculous point, and suddenly then they're 9 points up, they're 10 points up, they're really pushing. You can actually notice a lot of the times, one of the things about And we might turn to this team later. Like even when Carrigalway, when they're like sometimes the points they got some ridiculous scores, but they're from range. Like Oisin Flynn had an amazing point. Michael Galway actually had a shot that just, it was inches between going over the crossbar. Keep gets hands up to pluck it out. But then immediately, because you're against Loughrea, if you're not hitting it dead, you're in trouble because they will work that ball through each line. And the reason I'm kind of stressing this, Paul, like full disclosure, like it was a team for me. After Galway played Limerick, there was a lot of people who looked at that game and talked about Galway hurling, and I'm talking nationally now, and questioned the character of that team, questioned their stomach, their spirit, their heart, that all is kind of, and with the greatest respect in the world, I think that's total nonsense. I think I put no stock in that. I was at that game. That's not what I saw. What I saw was a team who struggled to react to an adjustment, a mid-game adjustment, where a half-forward line or treated slightly deeper. You couldn't go along with your bucket anymore, and you had to be able to work it through the line. You had to, and right until the last minute, Tom Monaghan's point, they didn't do it. That was the only time they did it in the game. That's what I saw from the Galway team. And the reason that was so frustrating for me watching that, or the reason that I think a lot of people would take issue with that, is because watch a team like Loughrea and watch how they can work the ball through the lines, watch how well coached they are. There's players that can do that. That is, the Galway hurling has that capability to mix it that way, to move to the lines, and Loughrea are the perfect testament to that. You watch that point that I mentioned, and they did it the whole way through. Like, they have such an incredible ability to work that score, to play, and McManus will come back, Oisin will come back, and they'll be able to play it long if they need to. But my point is that they can mix it both ways.
Yeah, and it's kind of actually similar to Limerick. Garage Loughnane is vital to that Loughrea system.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Particularly that Galway, the shot I mentioned. If you, again, just a small little thing that, like, I'm sure you were the same, but when you were growing up and you games that officers coming to your school, the one thing they're always talking about was like head up, like scanning, and it's a really hard skill to learn. But the exact same thing, like as soon as that goalkeeper's catching the ball, he's looking. All he wants to do is find an option. It's never. Have you ever seen him put his head down and lump a ball, like not know what he's doing with it? He's always so considerate with how he's, and I mean that's before he even gets started on his puck outs. I'm talking about from play here. So yeah, you're right. He's totally integral to it, and everything about Loughrea. Just you're sitting in the stand, you're looking down in front of you, and John Conlon is there with a little notebook writing notes, and you're thinking, what is this guy bringing to this head up? Like this one of the, to me, the all-star centre back this year is there on the line. A guy like Gavin Carey, who, like, by all accounts, just a really highly regarded coach. A guy who's currently in actually for it's been confirmed he's a contender for the 20s job. Who's worked with Camogie in the past. A really kind of a high level coach who, as the evidence is there right in front of you, that he can coach the game to be played this way. So yeah, as I say, the only thing you could possibly go against them, and this is real kind of barstool stuff, is are they actually going too well for this time of the year? Because everything else, it's hard to pick holes in.
Yeah, Gavin Carey, obviously he worked with Dublin and Clare previously.
Yeah.
How much of a boost is it? Because I was only putting the question on the football podcast of how much of a boost would it be to have Jack McCaffrey if it's all to, but even a player like Conlon, how much of a boost is it to have him involved with a club team?
That's so. Okay, so I'll answer that question in 2 days. Firstly, the idea of just getting in a high level, a big star into a club, I don't think that has struck anymore. I don't think it works. Okay. I don't think this idea of star appeal isn't. I don't think, a lot of, you go into clubs now, Paul, they're all mixing with very talented intercounty players already. Like, how much more, with the greatest respect in the world, how much more allure, or this idea that they're all going to be an awe when somebody walks in the dressing room, I don't fully buy that. But crucially, John Conlon is not just about being John Conlon, it's how much of an intelligent fella he is, how much of a smart hurler. You can see that in his evolution in his own game from the forwards to the backs. A couple of years ago, I interviewed John Conlon about this, what it takes to play as a sweeper in hurling. And it was on a podcast I did years ago, and the breakdown he gave, like I can still remember it vividly, just how good a reader of the game he was, how honest he was. He was actually, at the time, he was criticizing is not the right word, but he was analysing Pádraig Walsh and what he was doing for Kilkenny. And he made like a couple of small points, like, watch the score back, look how, you don't ever want a sweeper competing with the fullback and a full forward, for example, and behind him, because he's the one who's supposed to be there on the break. Like, he's supposed to be covering, you don't want him too deep, because if he's too deep, all he's doing is be concerned about goals, and they'll pick you apart with points. Like, you want to be able to clog that extra, find that middle ground. He just gave a really detailed breakdown. And from that one conversation alone, everything I know about John Conlon, I'd say he's an incredibly intelligent fella. He's got a very good grasp of what it takes to be an intercounty hurler in terms of, look at it, how he came back from his ACL and effectively rebuilt his body. So all of that stuff, I think, is invaluable. It's a huge addition.
Yeah, we're not too sure either exactly what John Collins' full role is. I don't think anyone from Loughrea is going to tell you either.
That's a
fact. But like, it could just be a match day thing, because presumably he's still playing with his club, like in Clare, like, so you just wonder how he's managing this all. But it's something else. But just on the Loughrea management team, it's actually, you talk about how good they are and everything, but I think there's something like 10 people involved in the full backroom team. Like, they're obviously all intelligent, but there has to be a serious amount of delegation there between all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. Like, I saw a couple of people talking about that. I put it up on Twitter, and somebody tuning back, have they enough selectors? And like, if you think about a club, if I said to you tomorrow, Paul, I want you to take over a club, right? And you immediately, the first thing you're thinking was, I need a coach, I need a couple of selectors, I need logistics people, like, and who's going to fill the water, bring the cones, if you need a camera, set up the camera, all that kind of stuff. So you're immediately talking about 4 or 5 people there, and then you're talking about, you definitely need a physio. A lot of clubs now also need a doctor, so that's another 2 people. You need well, I'm obviously going to say this, I think you need an analyst. Like, so you need, suddenly then you're talking about, like, we're 7 or 8 bodies deep, and all Loughrea did was listed them all. Like, go through the list there. They have, like, they have their doctors, and they have their medical, and they have everybody all listed. The only thing they did is not, as you mentioned there, they didn't list what all their roles are. But I would say if every club was honest and listed every single person who was involved in some capacity, I'm not saying now, like everyone who's gives them a dig out of the small stuff, but everybody who's involved across the board, I'd say a lot of clubs would end up on similar numbers. So I don't know, is it necessarily, the one thing is just from a coaching perspective, you mentioned, Gavin, Tommy Kelly actually would have been involved with Clare previously, so would have Kelvin in a strength conditioning capacity. So from that perspective, Shane Cusack is in there as well, another good coach. So they have that blend there too. But I don't think, you see this big long list of names, like, wow. But when you actually delve into it, I think it's pretty normal.
Yeah, it's actually a point whenever you thought about it, because even you're looking at most clubs, there's 7 to 8 involved. Just before we go away from this match, just kind of 2 things. Are Loughrea still, like, are they favourites for you now to win the Tom Callan? And like, where do you, just after that then, where do Cappy go from here?
Are they favourites? I don't know. It's a 2-horse race. I mean, not just from a bookie's perspective, but in a lot of people's heads too. But I think it would take. It's so hard to write off a club like Thomas's until they're beat, like until it actually happens. And like this talk has been around for a long business. They have just, really admirable spirit and a remarkable ability to dig it out. And when you thought they were buried the first day in the first the draw final last year, go back to that game. So I'm not as convinced as other people are that Loughrea are that step ahead. I think it's neck and neck between the two. Like, they're right going stride for stride. So I think you want me to. I don't know, Paul. I still am. If you ask me for a winner, I'm still kind of leaning towards St. Thomas's, but just purely because of, look at the bank of history there. That has to count for something. So, and I think Loughrea are coming. They've done everything right, but right now, after 2 group games, I'm not straying too much from that. And then, on the flip side, the other part of your question, I think you just have to be honest about the nature of this championship and the fact that there are teams who are a good step ahead, and what St. Thomas will have done to clubs in the past, like they, Portumna have fallen victim to that previously as well. I'm not just talking about over the last couple of years. I think you just have to internalize it, like you compartmentalize what it is. What it is. These 2 teams are at a really high pitch right now, and it's just about not letting that roll. Like, not you can't let it slide. Exact same principle you would have in a game about not letting one mistake lead to another mistake. You apply that to a loss. Like, don't let that loss bleed into what's coming. So I think that's it's a psychological challenge rather than a tactical one.
Is Cappy's challenge physically up front? Because you look at a lot of their forwards, you've Niall Collins, Liam Collins, John Marion, all unbelievable hurlers. But maybe just in the last year or 2 have they lost, maybe, because like Damien Joyce was obviously a huge physical player they used to have, But if they lost a bit of that, do you feel?
I don't like. Yeah. So part of it is about playing to those players' strengths too. Like, you know, with the great. So like some of the ball that was in on top of, especially, you know, Liam Collins, I don't think necessarily the very first ball he got, one out in front, was foul for a free, and you think, right, that's good as out, but you know, a ball out in front, but it has to be, it's a particular type of ball, and you're kind of trying to work to a midpoint and then hit him, rather than, that's the one thing about Loughrea. I know I said this earlier as well. I was trying to make the point that because of the way they move and run the ball so quickly, if you put aimless ball against a team like that, that's a launch pad. You're suddenly so vulnerable. I mean, you know, there's certain teams. We can talk about this team in a second, because a game that was screaming out to me about this was the Castlegar game. But like, Sean O'Donnell is a Limerick analyst, and I've heard him talk. He's a really intelligent guy, Limerick hurling analyst. And Sean often would say the team who shoots most wins. So this is a really simple principle. That's why, you know, you can hear talk, and this is real talk, like this talk that is actually within the dressing room too, about trying to hit 40 shots in a game. If you can hit 40 shots, that's a big thing for them. Now there's a caveat to that. They don't care about wides, because that's a chance to reset and then they can launch a repad. But if you puck it short, that's a killer. Go back to the Munster final for the Clare game. The wides isn't what killed them. It's pucking the ball into Nicky Grade's hands. We just mentioned it precisely with Loughrea. You can't puck a ball into hands, because that's when you're slightly open. They're so methodical, they won't give the ball back there. They will put it dead, and you're vulnerable in those circumstances. So that, rather than, I don't think it's necessarily about, oh, we need to put a big giant on the edge of the square and lump ball on that. I think it's a more subtle thing that it takes time. And I'm sure Loughrea are playing this way because of a couple of weeks' work. This is months and months of, you know, really methodical coaching to get to a level where you're comfortable enough to win a ball in your own full back line and try and take a man on or try and run it out from there, that you're not, you know, you don't have the tendency to just puck the ball away. Like that stuff doesn't happen overnight.
Just then, in the other game in that group, Kilnadeema and Mullagh, that was a game I'd say both teams have really looked at since the start of this year. Obviously, 3 coming out of the group, it probably just, well, there's still probably a chance for Mullagh, but realistically, it probably just secures Kilnadeema's place now into the knockouts, like, because both them teams see that group, like it was a difficult challenge for them all along.
Yeah, that's the reality, Paul. Yeah, that's just the team we're going back to at the start, and that maybe, and I would stress too, by the way, you know, as much as there's some justified criticisms of a format, if you were to go to what some people wanted in terms of, you know, a 2 out or whatever, that doesn't fix this problem. Like that, this is just competitive sport. Like there are going to be, if we going to end up in a situation where we've got 2 reasonably strong clubs and 2 clubs who are a good bit ahead. It was unfortunate for Moycullen the way the fixtures fell in terms of starting with what was arguably your hardest game. You know, it just, that team we're talking about there in terms of how things can tend to slide. I think that's a frustration. So yeah, I wouldn't overreact to the nature of that. Sometimes it's just the way the cards are dealt.
My couple of injuries too, like Phil McDonough has, he's a huge player for them. He's went through a couple of injuries, but like it's a huge result there really for Kilnadeema, and it puts them right back into the mix now, and they're going to look to build, because obviously last year they had a couple of injuries too. But just on that, you referenced Castlegar and Sarsfields over the weekend. Sarsfields were really predicted to come out of this group comfortably enough to everyone, but it makes this group like really, really intriguing now, because if you look at the table at the minute, you have Ardrahan on 3, Sarsfields on 2, Castlegar on 2, and Claregalway on 1. So like nobody is technically qualified yet. It's really open. But just on Castlegar's stunning Sarsfields this weekend, obviously everyone's aware of the clip that went out with Kevin Brady from the podcast about Castlegar's soft mentality. Maybe it's given them a bit of motivation now, but like they really have, like, but in the general Galway hurling public, they really have got criticism in the last few years. But like, it's a huge result then for them to stun Sarsfields.
Yeah, it is. Maybe there's something to be said for that. I think Dave Collins had some harsh words from Mellows on the radio last week as well that seemed to have registered a small bit, I think. So yeah, maybe there's something to be said for the call outs. This was a this was an interesting game. This was a really interesting game. I saw. Look, I'm not working at these games, which I mean is part of the joy of actually being able to just sit down and watch games from a, you're not head in a laptop trying to pile together a match, but you can just watch a game for what it is. But I did start taking notes during this game because it was in that team. This was the idea that I'm getting at about shots. Both of these teams were, I'm looking at my notes here. It was actually started pretty well. We're 5-2 up, but crucially at that stage, Castlegar got off 10 shots. If you include the 2 that went short, Greg had a line ball as well. I don't know if you remember that, just a sideline that he just rifled it in, but it dropped short. So I'm going to include that as a shot for the purposes of this. But so they still.
It was the younger players, though, wasn't it? Craig Thomas, Sean Neary, these fellas stepping up.
Yeah, big time, and I'll return to that in a second. But just from a principal player perspective, the fact that you're getting off shots isn't necessarily a bad thing. Those short ones are kind of a killer. But going back to this idea, if you're going to rifle a goal, you need to be putting to bed. And if you're not putting to bed, you need a break to go your way. That's what you need. You need a long ball into the edge of square to break kindly. You need, that's the only thing that's going to pay off in a situation like this. And it's just ironic that, on the flip side of that, when Sarsfield hit 13 points, I was just looking at my notes, they also had 13 wides on top of that, but a ball didn't break kindly for them. Whereas that goal, O'Callaghan's goal, that's the classic example of what I'm talking about. Like, that is a ball, slight mistake in a full back line. A brilliant Thomas's hand pass there, by the way. Gee, like, just to see that runner to a big, kind of loopy ball, hand pass straight over the goalkeeper's coming turning over the line, and suddenly you've got a goal and you've got that break. And now that's so. The fact that you were rifling shots, even though they were down, as I say, at the start of the game, that wouldn't be a major concern because you're still getting shots off. You're still creating chances. Is the point I'm trying to make here. You're not, so they're still in the game from an analysis perspective. If you were looking at the data, you would say we're not too far away here. And on the flip side, and the goal, Sarsfield score a goal because they throw Joe Cooney up there, they win a free, and it's a really well hit free, but it's probably coming too late. But there was that spell when they're 3 points down. I think I'm right in saying, and then they get 3 frees in a row. They score 2, they miss the final free, and then there's just a really bad spell of wides there when the momentum is starting to go against them. Which again, it comes from like Joe Cooney, who has an incredible strip tackle. Like, he sticks out to hurl, it's an unbelievable tackle, but 2 kind of long range wides that they're not sustainable shots, I would say, and both of them go wide, and now you're starting to panic. And the flip side, the ball goes up to Greg Thomas in the corner, and this is just a long direct ball. This again, ball breaks kindly. He's actually there's a goal on there realistically, like that shot but when they're a point up, there probably is a goal on there, but he probably takes the, what did they call it, the smart option, is it, or whatever the general plan is here, the safe option, yeah. And puts it over, but that letting that point slip there. So like I wouldn't be worried from a Sarsfield perspective.
No,
I don't know. I don't think so. Like, the fact as I said there, you've 90% of the work is there. Like, you've conceded a goal, which you can say it was a mistake, but how sustainable is if teams are going to be pumping ball into your full back line and hoping that it breaks kindly? That's not going to last. Like, so I wouldn't necessarily be too worried about that. They've got young Cosgrove. Geez, like, I was very impressed by John up top, especially when he was in close to goal. I think he's an excellent hurler. The spine of the team is very, very solid. I wouldn't be worrying about that. So I don't think it's like, from a performance perspective, you're just judging that, looking at that from a key metrics, whatever you want to call it. I don't think there was anything overly glaring.
And did you see something different from Castlegar that you haven't seen before?
No, not really. Like that's a good question. I wouldn't have said so. I did think that one thing that was interesting, watch, just again, eyes in the field, the amount of times when Castlegar had nobody in their full forward line. So they were, withdrawing a lot of bodies kind of deep to try and clog up that space. And that's partly why it can be when a team does that to you, that's maybe why the tendency is to do what Sarsfield did and kind of shoot from range and try and chip it off. And who's to say, like, on another day with better weather, we're going back to that team again. We've seen Joseph Cooney nail those shots a bunch of times before. I thought actually that it was kind of noticeable how especially Ian Fox in the middle they were trying to get 10 yards further. Like, they're getting to that certain level, and there's a lot of bodies there, and they were looking for that just one more pass to try and get inside. And sometimes maybe that didn't necessarily work. But I don't think like nothing drastic from a style perspective. Same, it's the old libels. Like I could come on here and I could laud Jeff Farher, and don't get me wrong. I mean, if you want me to do it, I'd gladly do it. But players like that kind of stepping up clutch. As I mentioned, that goal was a huge moment. The way they closed it out was even clever. Even I would actually argue, the free, like Kevin Cooney's free was amazing. But how resolute Castlegar were in terms of we're not going to be broken down here. Like you're not going to go past us. That even the intelligence, the foul in situations like that, I thought showed a good bit of fortitude maybe or or character. But yeah, nothing. I wouldn't have said they pivoted massively and started doing something completely different here. No.
Yeah, like if you're looking at games already for in the hurling next weekend, I just think Ardran and Sarsfield's Johnny Glynn's going to be back for that round for Ardran. It's just such a game to look forward to. That Ardran Craughwell game, the other game in Group 4, so it's Ardran obviously sitting top and Craughwell bottom at the minute. But that Ardran Craughwell game, when I was talking about it with Franny Ford and Liam Donoghue last week, we were kind of all saying that this could easily be a draw, and then you have Tom Monaghan's shot, which the umpire puts up, and then there's all this confusion. It was just a real tight, niggly, proper derby like between these two.
And yeah, and I think, like there's no that's what we kind of want. Like you want that's exactly what you're shooting for. But I would stress like that, just to double back to your point. So you can't fall into the trap here, right? Of all this kind of hindsight stuff, saying in hindsight this format is great or it's not great. But you're looking at that group, like to have 4 teams, 3. Am I right in saying it's 3 points, 2 points, 2 points, 1 point? That's the way that.
I think have only got a draw, and then Sarsfield's obviously Castlegar have only got to win, and then Ardran are 3 top.
So I think that is just incredibly exciting. Like there's not that what's still on the line there is brilliant, and I don't know if you can say that's just pure luck in terms of the 4 teams that were drawn together, or I'm not necessarily crediting the format, but my point is that sometimes we don't necessarily need to complain. Like you can take a second and review the stuff way down the line. It's okay to say I'm not really sure about this format or what we're doing here, and we can revise it all down the line. And for now, just enjoy it for what it is, which will be a very, very exciting final group of games.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. We were kind of saying at the start when we were doing the power rankings with Jeff Linsky, like he was coming to the point here that he really thinks Ardran are someone who can cause an upset along the way this year.
Yeah, and how much is that about who's coming back?
Yeah, well, Johnny Glynn obviously does help it, but they have looked really good the last day, and like there was opportunities for them to win it the last day as well.
Yeah.
But Craughwell as well, like Tom Monaghan was just outstanding for them. Adrian Prendergast as well, 1-9 as well at the weekend for Craughwell.
I think there's it's kind of become a theme of what I'm talking about here. So I'll go back to it again. What Johnny Glynn gives you in terms of the ability to play it both ways, that if you go long against a team, right? If you can just poke a team long, you go long to go short. So if you consistently go long, and again, another team actually kind of favour a long puck, I wouldn't necessarily go. That was one noticeable thing for me actually. Just to go back to that, the starts with Castlegar game. The one slight thing was, Castlegar were willing to go short, and even like Dolan and Hines on Sarsfield's side, they actually were willing to play the ball out if they needed to, like to go short. So the point I was trying to make there is when you're going long, if you're consistently going long, if you've got a guy like Johnny Glynn to aim puckers out, immediately you just force the opposition to come back, like ever so slightly to come back. And what that does then, that allows you to go short if you can now, obviously. But if you can go short and you've got other very talented point takers, the ability to play your lines, that gives you huge leeway. So it's not just about what Johnny Glynn does. Like Johnny Glynn in itself, what a luxury. But what that does to the entire team and to the opposition is also important, like how that influences them. So on that team, I think Jeff has a point. Like I think it really does, it disrupts an opposition massively when you have the ability to mix it whatever way you like, effectively.
Brings up Billy Tanyan as well too.
Which is a luxury again in itself, yeah.
Yeah, no, so that group's going to get really interesting. I think it's the most group to be interested in. Just then, so we've obviously touched on 3 and 4, but in 2 and 1, the way the table sits there at the minute is Thomas is on top of 4, Turlough in second with 3 after their draw with Gort, which puts Gort on a point, and then Portumna on 0. Just before we touch on Thomas's and Portumna, Sherlock and Gort. Sherlock leading 15-11. Paddy Commons works the goal excellently. However, he can manage to keep the ball in his hand because those conditions in Kenny Park were absolutely horrendous. Then Aidan Helbert gets a serious score under the conditions as well. But
created by Paddy again. Paddy did the pass, yeah.
But like Gort have went through a lot of turnover in the last few years, particularly losing Aidan Hart this year was a massive blow for him to retire. And it's a young team, but like this results now, like they do have a lot of superior goal difference to Portumna, but they obviously still have to play them. But this could really kickstart their season.
Yeah, it could. It could. I'll start with the positives here. So, like, I agree with you. I think what that result to do from a morale perspective is massive. I thought, like some of the other players, like Ben O'Donovan now, for example, the wing back, I thought had a thundering game. Like, really, was just a complete rock. I was interested to see what they're doing with Keelan Higgins, kind of playing as dropping into that as a fourth halfback, not necessarily a sweeper because he was still kind of pushing on as well. But I thought that was really clever. And yeah, as you mentioned, this goes back to the idea, by the way, of what we mentioned earlier. Sometimes you play that long ball, and all it takes is one guy to kind of have the know-how, which is what happened for that goal, to stick outside the ruck, just wait, hope the ball will break kindly for you. It does, manages to get it up, swings onto his left-hand side. He's got a defender thundering across. I think it's who's coming across, throwing his full body, instead managed to stick it into the bottom corner. Like, all of that was very, very impressive. I would say though, Paul, like there's no getting away from that last passage, which to me, like Sean Nolan, you could see visibly was fuming at the end of this game, like raging. And I think he's the case. I have to be honest, like I do think that last ball, to me, look, and I watched this game on stream, I wasn't there, so maybe it's just you've only got one camera angle. It looks like there's a punch in the throat there. Like there's definitely a dropped hurl, and he definitely raised his hand up to an oncoming defender. I think unless the draws in the back of your mind, that is a free out 99% of the time. I just think now, don't get me wrong, like the manner they pulled it back was so incredible, and as you mentioned, like Helbert, I know you mentioned to finish with a goal. I thought that point to do that in that scenario was equally impressive, but I can fully understand why in that one passage alone, Tullochmore would be stewing, because you could make a case just before that as well, the turnover in the corner on Shaughnessy. I kind of thought that was a free as well. Like, so I do think they probably, I can understand why any player would be as angry as Sean appeared to be. Again, I wasn't there, so you're all just judging off the stream here.
Yeah, and Turlough, obviously decisions will frustrate them there, but they were probably seeping into being a bit pissed off because like they had that game on so many occasions and they just left Gort hanging in. And even as you talk about there, Lennon, like he was obviously pissed off towards the end, and there was a bit of holding him back and stuff, but he was livid. And I think the Turlough players were probably livid as well, not putting it to bed.
Yeah, and look, that's a great point, Paul. Actually, like it could arguably be as much frustration with the fact that we conspired to let it slip as it could be with any decision. Like the whole circumstances of going from the moment that they went to, it was McDonough, wasn't it, who hit that their last point, who again had a thundering game in midfield. Like their spine actually, like from Fahy on, there's Fahy, Burke. McDonough in midfield at the next game, John, Lennon and Quirk. Like they've got a very strong, really talented spine, which is 9/10 of the battle in club hurling. So maybe you're right, maybe it is the manner of from hitting the front, from kicking on, from looking really good to a goal that again is probably a difficult one to plan for. The ball just breaks unkindly, and then a final point, which, as I said, I think you would be merited to feel frustrated about the manner of that.
Same time of Darren O'Shaughnessy, something to beat the Turlough players with now for the next week or two. It's like playing Thomas's. Whoever wins this gets the top spot in the quarterfinal.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure they'll bottle that. And I would say amidst all that frustration after the game, I think that the immediate point is, and that's because of the nature of these groups, I think that's the first thing you get into a dressing room, just dismiss it. I wouldn't be one bit surprised to hear of a couple of clubs who might play a challenge game this weekend. I would say just to get it out of the system. That's put to bed. We're moving on. We're thundering into this final group game. So yeah, I'm sure that it was probably referenced afterwards, but I don't necessarily know how much it will carry over for the next 2 weeks.
The other game, St. Thomas's 331, Portumna 210. Anyone who's stupid enough to have doubts about St. Thomas's this year, it's been put to bed, because like you were looking at that game at half time and you're saying it's tight, but to come out and do what they scored in the second half, it's remarkable.
Yeah, they're like this, and this is, I remember we were out in Loughrea for, I'd say it was the sponsorship launch for Galway GA the first week of December. The Intercounty was just coming back, and Henry was there anyway, and David Burke was there, but he had spent a couple of days celebrating and wasn't talking to the media as a result. But Henry was there, and I remember somebody asked him, like, just a general question: what do you make of the St. Thomas story? Like, just what this club have achieved, the fact that they're on history. And I mean, immediately he's a guarded enough guy and would kind of keep his cards close to his chest, but immediately just kind of completely lauded all of that intangible stuff, like their spirit, the character of that club, what they pulled from. He went on to he drew the comparison between his Ballyhale and the club he grew up in and St. Thomas's. He thought there was hugely aligned in the way they played each other. It had specific plaudits. This was after the replay final last year, bear in mind, so he really had specific plaudits for Conor Clooney and what he had done too. But I think there was, that really registered with me in terms of away from the way they hurl, just the fact that they have this like incredible ability to keep going. A manager who is constantly reinventing himself, who seems to have you'd say the appetite for learning, is trying to regenerate as a wrong team, but it's like a small little tweak every single season that kicks them on. Like they're an incredibly admirable club, and that was the point they're trying to make earlier. By the way, that's how it is. So it's nearly impossible.
It's everyone trying to get to their level of grounding games out, having the know-how in the latter stages. It's just what every club's obviously trying to win the Tom Callanan, but you talk about the spirit there and everything they have. That's what every club's trying to get to.
Yeah, exactly, and that's as I said earlier, I think that is a given in intercounty hurling. Maybe not necessarily always a given in club hurling. Something you're trying to forge, and especially when players are coming and going, it's harder to create that bond. But when you have it, and you see it in Thomas's now, like when you have it, it's unbreakable, and it is that's why I found this, like, I just don't know how you could, when you've seen it in front of your eyes so many times, you've seen a club backs to the wall in really close games, and they consistently manage to dig it out. And they have a cause too, by the way, Paul. I'm not saying that this is anything that they would discuss internally, but I would say, and just having covered that game last year, the manner of their semi-final loss, I'd say was a sickener. Like I do think that, like you would give full credit to both teams involved in that game, but I do think that Thomas would have felt that they sold themselves short on the day, and that maybe there's something to put right there too. I'm not saying that's something they would speak about internally, but that even just the thought of that in the back of your mind is a powerful resource.
Yeah, even Joe Cannings said, look, really impressive for Portumna too in this club championship. Really impressive at Thomas's. With Thomas's though, people are talking about David Burke's injury and he's a big blow, but it's almost like they've got a new player back now with Shane Cooney. Yeah,
so I was actually thinking about this the other day. I don't know if you remember, before the final last year, the talk was, is Shane Cooney fit and is Morgan fit for Loughrea? Yeah. And I remember thinking, with the greatest respect in the world, Shane Cooney is a bigger loss because they probably don't they don't have the resources, and second, but that's just what happens when you've got small clubs, that you're very reliant on key individuals. But also, I do think that a player like that, the idea of carrying a hamstring injury, you need kind of, because of the nature of his game, you need a run. Like you need a bank of work there. It's not like something that even, I don't know if you watched the Jack Grealish seemed to be carrying his shoulder a good bit last weekend, but that's something that you kind of try and play around and try and manage. With a hamstring, you're on the precipice every single time. Like you don't know that the thought of it going in the back of your mind every single minute, if you're carrying that, I think is massive. So to get a clean bank of health into him is like that's massive, and that's the nature of the season too. Another guy who I'd say maybe has aspiration to kick on with Galway and to put that right as well. So yeah, that's there's no getting away from that. That's a huge addition. And just on the David Burke is a massive loss. Don't get me wrong, but it's very evident in whatever walk in every team he's involved in that he is a huge off-pitch contribution as well. Like the stuff we're talking about here in terms of spirit and leadership. And I even remember actually it was one thing he when he did an interview with you a couple of months ago. If anybody has listened to that, they should go back and listen to that. It was a thing that he seemed to put value in itself, is the idea of not just of acting like a hurler, like what that actually means, what it takes to be at that top level. And that's all still there. Like they didn't lose that. They didn't lose which again, as we said earlier, it's not as equally as important, but it's still a hugely important thing to have. So his presence alone, even though he's not on the field, is still a very important thing for St. Thomas's.
Yeah, they really look like they're going to be head stopped again this year. They'll be there, and between them and Turlock now, whoever wins that is obviously going to get the top spot and straight into a quarter final. So it'll be huge, and it's a game to look forward to too. If I was from Clarenbridge, I'd be absolutely sick. Just the manner of the goal, the ball's in the half back line. It's almost like it's gone into half of a ruck, and then the ball somehow pops over the Clarenbridge defence, and Luke Linsky gets onto it, and a remarkable finish to win it. But we were saying on the podcast last week, they need to be wary of Kilnadeema because they're one of the sides that relish being these underdogs. But the way they just stole that is huge.
Yeah, no, the two elements of that. I do think that sometimes it can look very lucky for the ball to arrive to Luke the way it did, but you still have to finish it. You still, that's not the job done. But yeah,
he almost said he had he had a lot of time to think about it, and there's so much space for him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you nearly have. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, you nearly freeze with the amount of time that you have over it. That there's a bunch of different options here. That's why part of me was kind of wondering with the. I agree with you. Paddy's finish was incredible for Gort, but what else is he going to in that situation? Get the ball up and pull on it. That's what's going through your head. It's a ball that's breaking across you. You've in your hand for what is it, a fraction of a second. Whereas if you've got more time, that can be the enemy too. But yeah, on your point, and I actually think Clarenbridge, I know Ninemorn is involved there as well. I think they strike me as a very well coached team, and that sometimes the breaks will just go against you. And that was the point I was making earlier, Paul. That's why I do think you just have to chalk that one down. It's totally cruel. It's absolute complete and utter sickener. But there's an element of two that doesn't let it slide. But yeah, you say you'd be sick if you're Clarenbridge. I would say it seemed pretty apparent that they were completely sick by the manner of it. Yeah.
They can obviously still recover here, though. It's not the end of the world by any stretch of the imagination. Because Ormore Mary now in Kilnadeema, that's actually first versus second. So Clarenbridge can still get into top spot here, and they're still going to be one of the challengers this year.
Oh, yeah, Jesus, is there any doubt about that? Yeah, and I suppose, yeah, that's a really interesting point, Paul. And I think it's something that we're going to become conscious of, not for Loughrea and Thomas's, definitely not. But one thing to watch as the year goes on is a reaction to a loss. Part of the benefit of a format like this is that there's huge learning available from you will never, as anybody involved, I'm sure you know this yourself, anyone involved in any club, any team at any level will tell you this. You learn way more from a loss than you do from any win. That is invaluable. And it'll be really interesting to see how teams react, and the teams that improve on that basis, that come back from this. Is there any better example of this, at least in my mind, than Limerick, their reaction after the Clare game this year, that to start to move back to their key hitters, or did a bit of experimenting around the middle, and just went from strength to strength to strength. And so I do think that part of the benefit of that, because it's not that cutthroat nature that you just have the two, there's a huge opportunity to chalk it down, to take what you can from it, to do a proper kind of a cold deep dive on it, and then to utilize that could actually be a benefit for a team.
I think it actually was a benefit for, you could say, then in the other game in that group, Ormore Mary bet Tommy Derkins 221-17. They conceded 3 goals against Cambridge in the opening game. They obviously conceded no goals, and like even just going by reports in the game, they looked really, really defensively secure from that, and they've improved. They've put themselves back into second and put themselves back into contention. But if there's ever a young player to get excited about, it's Ormore Mary's Rory Burke. He got 2 goals at the weekend. Now we all know he's one of these minors that there's going to be a lot talked about, but the excitement has to be there for this player.
Yeah, definitely. Like, and I think, I met a man from Ormore before the championship, and he was singing aloud to me that there's a guy in the corner playing for us today. You better watch him. So the club knew he was coming. You got Hannafy in the other corner, who's always good for a few scores as well. There's 2 things for me. Like, so the excitement about Rory Burke is justified, and this, and again, I didn't see this game, so just go do enough reports, but it does There does seem to be an element with Niall Burke where it's, I haven't gone away here. Like, I can still mix it. I'm still capable at this level, and I wouldn't dismiss that, to be honest. I do think you could put stock in. We're talking about. I mean,
he's very good against Clembridge too in the first game. I was
about to say that. Yeah. So that and the point I was making at the very start, you can't have it both ways. Like, you can't be lauding the standard of senior hurling and then say it doesn't matter from what that means going down the line. So I do think you have to put, when you see a performance like that, and you see a guy hitting double-digit points, you have to put stock in that. Like, that matters. That is impressive. And then, on the other side, from an perspective, to have, McInerney at the back, and he scored as well, I think. But just in terms from a density, there's a nice balance to that too. So yeah, I think that all bodes nicely.
Just on Kilnadeema, we've talked about opportunities that there's going to be for some of these sides that have come through that maybe mightn't have been expected, but the momentum and belief like that can do now for Kilnadeema. Like, Kilnadeema are 1 game away from booking their place straight into a quarterfinal.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the validation. They've won more last, don't they? So I think what you would get, like that, just from a confidence perspective, to get through that would be absolutely invaluable. And that in itself is a fairly attractive matchup too. Like, there's, if you're being selective about games you want to see in last weekend, there'll be no shortage of drama in that game either. So yeah, I agree with you. I do think there's, and that, I would say, Paul, if you were in a lot of clubs now will talk about teaming, like they might not necessarily say it outright, but you talk about building an idea of what you want it to be about. And if you're looking at that game from a Kilnadeema perspective, you're looking at coming up against Ormore, you're saying, what an opportunity this is for you. Like, lads, what we're on the edge of here, being one of the few undefeated teams in Galway Championship hurling, coming out that weekend and making a statement, validating our last 2 games. I think that's it. There's no other word to describe it than an opportunity.
Yeah, just on Larkin's, like, injuries haven't helped them. Ronan Murphy returned, Jason Flynn still out. It's not trying to be disrespectful about them at all, but just well, if they had all their players, they would be competing. But it's just caught up with them. Now they still have a possibility of getting through, but I think they have to beat Cambridge by 10 points in the final game there. So that's all really on the senior action. Just on the senior B action in Group 1. So Mullagh on top, 4 points. Haskell second, 4 points. Mellows, they're on 2 points in third. Athenry on 0, and look like Athenry are going to be in a relegation battle, which is hard to believe. Yeah, it really is. Like, that game at the weekend, Mellows and Athenry, it was a game where there was so much at stake, but Mullagh then, they've looked one of the form teams to make a jump back up here.
Yeah, the Mellows Athenry game, just to start with that one, is like is kind of remarkable, and Mellows are there no shortage of issues, I suppose you could say, but to turn around the way they did is very impressive. And now to think about Athenry on the edge of relegation is kind of is ridiculous. Like, and again, just I suppose maybe another testament to how competitive this championship is and how things can get a red card the first day out, and then that slides away from you, and then suddenly you meet a team who are absolutely hopping after their own fairly convincing loss and determined to put that right. And you're looking at backs to the wall sort of stuff. And yeah, just from a Mullagh perspective, again, you're going on form. I haven't actually frustrated maybe slightly with the nature of this, that I haven't seen as much of them as I would have liked, but looking on paper, it's hard to pick any holes in. Look, like, right ready. And another thing about this as well is that those teams, and this is true actually in both codes, the teams are kind of on either side of that, kind of the edge of the top end of intermediate and the lower end of senior. Like they're right able to mix it with each other. Those teams are kind of closely bracketed. The point I was making at the start is that it's the top teams and the rest where there's a bit of a stretch. But those teams they're all, there's very little between any of them. Like there's no one who will tell me that whoever comes up out of this is automatically going to go back down, because they're well able to mix it at that level as well.
Yeah, and then in the other group, you had beaten Port Pierce's 21-114. Kilnadeema beaten Climber 321-17. So the way that table sits now is Kilnadeema on top of 4, in second, 2, the Climber on joint points, third place on 2 points, and then Port Pierce's on the bottom with 0. If you're looking at form here, Mullagh have obviously been the form team in the other group, but then on the other side, it really has been Kilnadeema Leitrim.
Oh, big time, yeah, big time. And I suppose, like part of the nature of this is that you're kind of you're trying to. I don't think necessarily management itself would be in this thought process, but you're trying to time your run to a certain extent. That, and I would say there's certain clubs who are kind of conscious of this, that maybe you don't necessarily want to peak in August. But this suddenly you've built a wave of momentum, and there's more to come. Like you bottle both of those, and you've got the ideal combination.
Yeah, so it's going to be vital for Port Pierce to get back on track. But even with Kilnadeema, there's so much inter-county underage experience there, and even as the lads were saying last weekend, there's a lot of people tipping Kilnadeema to go all the way here. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. Just an intermediate then, Down stole it late against Turlock. 2 goals from Matthias Coleman. They went out 2-18-21, and the other game in that group, Carnmore and Ceylon, that takes place tonight in Toon Stadium as we are recording the podcast at the minute. Then just in Group 2, Cambridge 2-7, Rahoon 22. A big win there for Rahoon. Kilvacanty getting over Kiltormer 1-9 to 1-7. In Group 3, then in the Intermediate Hurling Championship, Meath 21 points, Ballygare 13, Abenakmoy 216, Crockwell 111, and then in Group 4 of the Intermediate Hurling Championship, we had Teen Aberdeen Irish 325 on Spiddale 10 points, and Kinbarra 23 points, Ballindereen 118. Conor Reid an instrumental there, Kinbarra coming out on top of that local derby. Maurice, just on the intermediate, is there any hurlers or teams that have stood out for you in that championship so far?
You mentioned it there, that Rahoon result is massive. And Eamon Brannigan is back as well, I think, this week, which is which again is a huge addition. So that's more than nicely. Probably a club who I would say would have their own frustrations about the way last year ended. Like they were right in that semi-final, wasn't it? And then a very difficult situation to manage when there's a kind of a serious injury on the pitch, and you're trying to manage lads' mentalities and all that sort of thing, and then suddenly you miss a penalty and it slides away from you. But like they're still thereabouts. Probably took them longer than they would have liked to get a manager, I've said, in the off season, but they've got JP O'Connell in there now, who's a very highly regarded coach and is excellent. And plus you throw in the fact that Brannigan is back as well. That I'd say that all that bodes nicely, Paul.
Could you see them going all the way this year?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like I think they've got all the ROMs every single year with a club like Rahoon. You're one step away, and there's something small that you're really close. And then John Hambry goes traveling for a while, and I know his younger brother Colin Hambry, who's been a brilliant defender for Rahoon for the last couple of years now, also spent time away, but he's back as well. So it's all about you're just trying to mesh that all together. Like there's no doubt, and they've got you've got your stalwarts guys who've been in that club for years, like Tony Oak obviously or Andy Dunn, but you mix that with it as well, and that all factors in too. So it just all it is, they have all the raw materials necessary. It's about trying to get all that to click, I suppose.
It's just so hard, I find, here when you're talking about intermediate, and you just Gene Aberdeen rack up a score like that again, and the man they have there, the Helm, and everyone's back. I know that group probably is a bit more, like, they've beaten Kinvara and Spital really, really well. They're already through now. It looks like straight into the quarterfinals. It'll be interesting to see with this chasing back who's going to challenge Tina, and then probably Meath Aircourt, last year's county finalists, are coming behind them.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and I suppose that's the you like, I think every year there's a bar, like there's a and you mentioned earlier actually about Thomas's, which was a good point too. Like there's the team that you're kind of looking at, and that's the circle around, that's the one you're kind of putting the dot on. You're saying that's where if we can get there, geez, there's real validation about that. So hunted versus hunted, hunters versus hunted type of thing. But yeah, like in terms of what that means for a championship, it's hard to say. Like and that's why it probably would take. Like it would take an app, we talking about the Rahoon example there. Like it would take everything that all that round field coming together collectively to upset that. It's not just going to happen, without all of that firing together. So it's lightning in the bottle sort of stuff really that you're trying to get. But yeah, that's the bar, and that goes back to the point we made earlier about the standard of hurling as well.
Yes, so obviously, as I mentioned there, there's 2 games in intermediate tonight as we're recording. Ceylon, Carramore, that's going to be a really interesting game, and then the other game as well between
on Spital,
and Baldrain. So it's going to be interesting there to see how both of them games unfold. That's all we have on our hurling podcast for today. Thanks again to everyone for listening, and thanks to Maurice for coming on.